Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode of the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Thank you for tuning in. I run into this dilemma, I don't say all the time, but I run into it from time to time. People will ask me or remark to me, listen, I don't have the personality nor the interest, maybe not even the time, to be schmoozing at networking events. People see it as a waste of time, and I can certainly understand that. Some are better than others. Some are really good. Some are a waste of time, or can be a waste of time, and I guess it depends on the event. Sometimes you'll go and it's good, and sometimes you'll go and it's not. And so, people are leery of spending the time. Certainly post-COVID, or as people argue we're still in it. But, we don't have the lockdowns. People have kind of discovered that, traveling off to these things takes a whole lot of time. And, the half hour to get there, the half hour to get back, the hour and a half being there, or a couple hours being there, you just can't justify the time. So for whatever reason, they have this dilemma for themselves. They feel they need to network, but again, they don't have that personality. They don't want to be in a room full of people, and we've talked about that before on the podcast. They don't want to be in a room full of people, and they just feel like the schmoozing, if you will, the smoozing, however you want to say it, that's not part of their DNA. They see it as being disingenuous. Now, I argue that they probably take the wrong position on it, but people are going to be who people are, and we're all a function of our past experiences. And people have had bad experiences. They don't feel comfortable at those events, then they don't feel comfortable at those events, and that's just the way it is. But at the same time, their network is not what they want it to be, or maybe it's never been where they want it to be. People are, as people are coming out of the COVID lockdown, it's like, okay, I need to reinvigorate things, and there are people who have come through COVID and have lost their jobs and decided to start businesses, and for a while it was going well. It's, if you make $1 today, it's easy to make $2 next month, and you can say, wow, I doubled my sales. And I realize that's kind of a ridiculous statement, but change the dollar amount from $1 to $1,000. It's easy to go from 1,000 to 2,000. At some point, you don't get the gains. At some point, you kind of plateau out. So people will start a business and like, this is great. I'm doing it. I'm making money. Maybe not as much as I was making when I had a job, but I'm making money, and I can see it trending up, and it trends to a point, and it's really easy to trend to a point and then to get beyond a point. They need to do something. They need to get out. They need to meet other people. They need to get out and network, and maybe don't feel like they have time, or really don't feel comfortable again in those situations. But for whatever reason, they know they need to network, but they don't want to be going to networking events, and that's the dilemma that I'm hit with. What do you tell the person who just doesn't like to do those things? And what I always say, it's a pretty consistent answer if you have heard me be interviewed on other people's podcasts, or if you're somebody who's interviewed me, what's that quick surefire means of bolstering your network? What's that actionable advice you would give somebody they could take action on today? And for me, the answer to this particular dilemma is simple. Um, the dilemma being I need to network, don't want to be networking events, or the question being what's that one thing that somebody can do right here, right now to really get their network fired up. And what I always say is determine what you're passionate about and then find somewhere to volunteer and figure out where your passion lies. Um, and I think there are lots of opportunities out there to volunteer. Your passion might be your kids. Well, there are things going on in your kids' school they're going to need help with. Parent-teacher organizations, PTA, PTO, PTA, whatever, however they call it in your area. Um, you know, Kids have school plays. There's the band that certainly needs volunteers. My go-to. I was an athlete. Not saying whether I was good or bad, but I was an athlete all the way up through college, and sports was always kind of my thing, and still is my thing. And when I was looking for somewhere to get involved at my kids' school, they went to a Catholic school, Catholic elementary, and there were certainly opportunities there. They had a sports program, and it was really geared around kids having fun, and I was involved with that for about 10 years until my kids pretty much all left that school and went on to high school. That was kind of, time for me to move on. They had had enough of me, and I had had enough of it. But I spent 10 years, volunteering. That was my passion. Other people have, other passions out there. You might have a family member who has battled with cancer, and so cancer is kind of top of mind. Some people it's homelessness. Um, there are lots of opportunities to get involved in your community, however you define your community. Charitable, educational, the opportunities are out there. You just have to kind of ask yourself, well, where do I have an interest? Opportunities to coach. It's hard to imagine somebody who has no interest in any manner with respect to, you know, something they're concerned about. Um, and I'm not saying it's got to be a hardcore political sort of thing. I'm not saying that at all. But there's something out there that you're passionate about. Whatever that is you're passionate about, what I tell people to do is go out and find somewhere to volunteer, as I did with the St. Matthew Athletic Association. Um, that was my opportunity to volunteer. So if you're struggling with that, I don't want to go to networking events. I don't want to be at networking events. I don't want to take the chance at networking events. But I need to network. What do I do? Well, go volunteer. Go find something you're passionate about, and it's got to be something you're passionate about. If I didn't really enjoy sports, um, the athletic association wouldn't have been a good place for me. It just wouldn't. I would have lost interest. And I have people approach me from time to time about getting involved in their initiative, and it's like, yeah, it just doesn't interest me. Just doesn't. It's not something I'm passionate about. And if I'm not passionate about it, I'm not really going to do it justice, and it's not going to do me justice. Now, I'm sure there are some of you who will say, volunteer? Are you kidding? I already told you I don't have a lot of time. And I get that. I totally get that. But with volunteering, you help yourself network in two ways, is the way I look at it. First, when you serve whatever you're passionate about, you never do it alone. You never do it alone. When I was part of the St. Matthew Athletic Association, and there are other things that I have been involved in, am involved in. Rolling out of the athletic association, I was certainly involved with my kids in their sports endeavors in high school. To a lesser extent, I was mainly like the team photographer. But I also around that time started what we call the charitable roundtable, where every month I bring in not-for-profits and help them get networked. It's my it's my it's my superpower, helping people become better at networking. Um, But when you do these things, you never do them alone. When I was on the Athletic Association, I got to meet lots of people. There were a lot of other people who shared that same passion. There was a gentleman who was the radio voice, is the radio voice for the Columbus Blue Jackets, who was on the board with me. He was in charge of one of the sports. There were other people, who were from the community. And when we had meetings, we never talked about our businesses, and that's not the point, but it was an opportunity for us to get to know one another. And people always found out about what it is that I did. It would come up, In this day and age, it's really easy because you just go on LinkedIn and you do a search, and you can quickly do a search and say, oh, okay, yeah, that's what this person does. And there were a few times with the Athletic Association where there were other board members where we would just have a call and touching base on something related to the association and just saying, uh, Dave, what is it that you do? Just very curious. We all have families. We all feed our families. We all have households and pay for those households. What is it that you do to pay for your particular household? And people would share about what those sorts of things are. And, it's interesting, but you see people doing these things, volunteering, and they're out there rubbing elbows with other people, and those people get to know them, get to like them, get to trust them. A concept we go over and we talk about over and over again on this podcast. It's about getting people to know, like, and trust you. And when you're out there elbow to elbow, figuratively speaking, with other people who are passionate about the same thing that you're passionate about, homelessness, cancer, human trafficking, you know, hunger issues, sports, literacy. There's lots of different things that, you know, pet pet charities, pet adoption. Um, when you're rubbing elbows with these people, you know, they're going to get to know you. They're going to get to like you, and they're going to get to trust you. It's just going to happen in time. Now, I'm not saying it's a one-off thing. Yeah, I went to one thing and nobody asked about me. No, you. That's why I say you have to be passionate about it. You truly have to be invested in whatever this is. And when you do that, because you're rubbing elbows with these people, you have a plethora of new contacts who share your interest. And they can't help but want to help you somehow, some way. I mean, we'll pick on realtors, right? If you're a realtor and you're involved in one of these types of organizations and somebody there needs to buy or sell a house, or somebody's asking them, who do you know who does real estate? If you've done well, you're passionate, you're involved in the organization, you've put a good foot forward. Um, what do you think they're going to do? You think they're just going to Google realtors, or they're going to turn to you? They're going to turn to you. It's human nature. We're not going to take a chance on one of the biggest investments we make, a house. And so we're going to reach out to the people that we know, we like, and we trust. So that's the first thing when you volunteer. And again, something you're passionate about. When you volunteer, you're going to be rubbing elbows with other people who are passionate about what you're passionate about. And that's just kind of an easy road to getting them to know you, like you, and trust you. But the second benefit with respect to this volunteerism is others see you giving back to the community. When it came to the Athletic Association, yeah, there were other people who were involved on the board, but there were a lot of other people who had their kids in school or in sports, who were in the school and had their kids in the sports, and you became visible to them. And they, you know, you have the ability to develop your brand as a result of that, right? And people want to associate with people who are invested in the community, even if they're not passionate about what you're passionate about. I see people, I'll pick on Mary Jenkins. Mary Jenkins has a cancer charity. It's called COC. And what she does is she raises funds to to help people who are struggling financially as they're battling cancer. If that was her story, I've had her on this podcast a couple of times sharing that story, and you could look up those episodes. But my point is, I think what her charity I think is great. It doesn't resonate with me. It's not something I'm passionate about. Should I be? Arguably you should be all of them, but it's not one that I am passionate about. But I just think the world of Mary because she's passionate about it. And I just see the devotion she has to it. Another person who comes to mind is Brian Wallenberg. Brian Wallenberg runs a charity called the Byron Saunders Foundation. And what he does, and it's not just he at this point, but what he started doing was collecting money, collecting food, raising money to feed people at Thanksgiving. Thousands of people, 5,000-6,000 of people every year he's feeding. And, it's not necessarily a passion of mine like it is his, but I think the world of him because of that. But I also think the world of the people who are associated with him. Gina Winterstein, who's one of my franchisees, become heavily involved in it. And if you talk to Brian Wallenberg, he'll say that he didn't know what he would do without her because Gina's just kind of this can-do sort of person. And she's very organized, and she's just going to push things through. That's just her personality. And I just think the world of Gina. I thought the world of Gina before this, but it just kind of heightens it in my mind. So the point is that, when you see other people doing things, when other people see you doing things, I should say, even if they're not passionate about what it is that you're doing, they can't help but be taken in by the fact that you're passionate and that you're contributing to the community. Because when you contribute to one aspect of the community, it really serves the whole community. So just to kind of wrap up this, this surefire way to jumpstart your network, if you're not interested in going to networking events to schmooze, if that's not your personality, find something you're passionate about and get out there and volunteer. It's a great way to be rubbing elbows with people who share your passion, who will come to know, like, and trust you. It's a great way to brand yourself as somebody who gives to the community, however you define community. And, these things will, in time, draw business to you. Is it going to create sales in the next 30 days? No, it's not. But it will create this lasting aura about you that will create business for you for years to come.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.